Okay, so what we're focusing on now is repairing our worm gear. And this worm gear is what allows the carriage to traverse through the gearbox for normal cutting, not threading. So what happens is there's a keyway inside this worm gear that rides on the lead screw. These two little bushings here are in the casting of the apron, and this worm gear spins. Okay, so as this worm gear spins, when you engage your feeds, it engages a pinion gear, which then engages your rack to allow it to move. So these two bushings here are stationary, and these two collars are attached and pinned to the end of that worm gear, and they ride against these two bushings. So one of these bushings takes the thrust from when you're traveling from the headstock towards the tailstock, and the other one takes all the thrust when you're traveling from the tailstock towards the headstock in normal turning. So what we have here is uneven wear. So this was the one that takes the thrust traveling from the headstock towards the tailstock, and everything's fine with this. These little pecker tracks are from me getting this off, because I had to grab it with a pair of channel locks because this pin actually broke, or was broken. So you see this is typical, normal wear. Everything looks okay. This little hole here is actually a groove for a wick to come in, and the oil will allow oil to get in between the two faces and oil this bushing. Now this other one is the one that takes the thrust from the tailstock towards the headstock, which is where you would normally turn, and you can see the wear we have in there. Okay, you can see that hole almost disappear. So you unscrew this and take this off, and you can see, or hopefully you can see, the ridge built up around the edge. So we need to replace that material, and how we're going to do that is we're going to braze in a bronze washer. So what I want to do is we're going to set up in the lathe, and we're going to take this down to a nice clean surface. Now I'm going to go to, it just touches this wick groove, and we'll clean up that entire surface. This collar here has a little bit of a dish surface to it, and we'll also set this up and make this nice and flat. Now I've already measured everything out, and this bronze washer is more than thick enough to make up for what we're going to be taking off. And then we'll braze this into place. Okay, we'll bore it to the correct size, and then we'll go over to the mill and I'll put that little wick groove in it. Now I had a choice when sizing this washer. I could have either gotten a washer that was the same, where the ID of this was the same size as the ID of this bushing, or a washer where the OD was the same size as the OD of this bushing, or a washer that was in between that would overhang both sides. So what I chose is one that had where the washer was the same size as the OD of this bushing. Reason being is the OD of this here doesn't really matter much. So when we braze this on, if we're off a little bit, it's not going to make a difference. Okay, we can get it pretty damn close, but it's not going to make a difference. This ID is pretty critical because there's a rod that's going to be coming through here, or the end of that shaft is going to be coming through there. So we need to make sure that the ID of this is concentric with the ID of this, and it's a lot harder to do that to line it up and then braze it than it is to just braze this on and bore it. Now the reason why I didn't go with the in-between size is just it was an extra step to machine the outside of this I didn't think we needed to take. So that's the way we're going to do it, or I'm going to do it. So let's go ahead and set up on the lathe, and we'll get set up to take this down to a nice clean surface. Okay, so basically we're going to make that little step disappear. Still got a hair left there. Okay, just clean that up. Have a nice clean surface to be able to braze to. Now we need to do the same thing with this, and I wonder, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take off the jaws here. If I take off these jaws, then I'll be able to hold it by the master jaws and get this edge here nice and flat up against the chuck. Okay, you can see by taking off those jaws, I'm able to grab it by the master jaws and have it flat up against that chuck. And we're not putting a whole ton of, all of our pressure is going to be this way, and it's not going to want to fling out. We're not going to be taking a ton of material off of there anyway, so it's not going to come flying out. So its most worn spot is right on that line right there. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but we're basically just going to take off enough to get rid of that. Yeah, you can see that line now. Alrighty. Now we're not going to be brazing anything against that, but now it has a nice flat surface to run up against that new bronze washer that we're going to braze in place. And let me just grab my other tool here, and we'll just knock down that edge. And there we go. Alright, so let's set up to braze our piece onto that bushing. Alright, so I'm getting ready to braze this washer on there. We're going to braze or silver solder or whatever you want to call it. And we're going to be using just 45% silver rod. And trick with this stuff is making sure everything's nice and clean. So we cleaned off the washer here. Cleaned everything off here, made sure there's no oil, and we're also going to, our flux is going to be stay silver, which is a white paste flux. If this stuff dries out on you, which it will if you don't use it a lot, just add water to it, and it, like I said, it's a paste. Okay. And we're just going to place that washer right on there. Alright, the capillary action will actually wick this stuff right into place. Now, I don't have an oxyacetylene rig in here. What I am going to use is what I use at work all the time, which is a turbo torch. Now this is a number 11 tip. What this is this is acetylene and air mixture. So it's hooked up directly to an acetylene tank, and it sucks in air through these vent holes. And you know, I use it at work to braze pipe and stuff. So this here is a number 11 tip. If this doesn't get the job done, this one will. This is a number 32 tip. These are a lot more. They're not as hot as an oxyacetylene torch, and they're not as directional as an oxyacetylene torch. So they're not more as accurate. So we're going to try it with this smaller one first. If this doesn't work, we'll get Big Bertha out here. But either way, we'll get that sucker brazed in place. Now, it's also going to be very loud, so I'm not going to be able to talk. So I want to heat up the cast iron first. We got to get this cherry red. So we look pretty good. It's a little bit chunky around the outside edge. I'm not worried about that. That's because the flux didn't flow that way. What I was looking for is when I touched it, is that these little bubbles that are here actually suck in underneath this piece. So it wicks underneath. It's all capillary action. So this is attached here. So we got to let this cool down, and then we can just dress up the outside and bore the inside. Okay, so we're getting ready to clean this up here, and you had a few little bulges on the outside. What happens is as it fills up, it'll only suck a certain amount in, and then whatever else bubbles up on the edge. That's all that is. I'll come off in 2 seconds, but I wanted to show you that it did flow in. You can see in there where that red is, that's flux, and there's braze right behind that flux. So you can see that it's got sucked in there by capillary action, and we're nice and attached. There's not much load on this. It's you know, just the thrust of the carriage. So there's not a whole lot of load on this anyway. But you know, we're permanently attached there. So we're going to set this up in the lathe. I'm going to do a quick skim on the OD here off camera, and then we're going to bore out the ID. Okay, so we got this trued up in the 4-jaw here, and you can see that we look nice all the way around. And we're just going to bore this ID of this washer out to meet the ID of that bushing. Should be pretty close, and we are. Let me just take a measurement of the other one. Okay, we're looking for an ID of 1 inch 375, and we're at 1 inch 325. Okay, we were just hitting the cast right there. Let me just make sure. Alright, we just need a little bit out of that. Okay. All right. Okay, so we're good to go there. And it's the same feeling as the other one does. Now we need to know our thickness here first. Okay, I was gonna do it on the mill, but it was just as easy to do it with a file, so that's what I did. So that groove is in there, and we're all set. Now the reason why I had to make sure that we added to this piece what we took off of this is because of the relationship between the two lengths here. Because this collar you can't just tighten down, it has a pin. You can see that hole and this hole, there's a pin that holds it together. So you can't just tighten this down a little bit more to make up for what you took off. So that's why I had to make sure that you know, we kept the relationship between the two the same. So a felt will stick out of there and that'll lubricate these two faces, which are nice and even now, so you can see the amount of material that we added there. So now we're ready to put the apron together. Okay, so I determined we needed 32 thousandths off of this face here to make up for what we took off of this and what we took off of this face. So we're just going to face that off. I'm going to come in here. There's 0. So we're going to take 15. There's 30. And there's our 2. Okay. So we should be good to go with that. Let me take it out of here, and I'll show you how we're going to do that groove. Okay, I was going to do it on the mill, but it was just as easy to do it with a file, so that's what I did. So that groove is in there, and we're all set. Now the reason why I had to make sure that we added to this piece what we took off of this is because of the relationship between the two lengths here. This collar you can't just tighten down. It has a pin. You can see that hole and this hole. There's a pin that holds it together. So you can't just tighten this down a little bit more to make up for what you took off. So that's why I had to make sure that you know, we kept the relationship between the two the same. So a felt will stick out of there, and that'll lubricate these two faces, which are nice and even now, so you can see the amount of material that we added there. So now we're ready to put the apron together.